Hello and welcome to episode 3 of this third season of the Weekly Defence Podcast, the show about defence procurement and military technology. I am your host, Richard Thomas, and in this episode we look at the UK's armed forces and efforts to counter growing threats posed by grey zones, which call for robust and secure communication pathways. And in an interview with Leonardo, we talk about its Falco Xplorer MALE UAV program and apparent delays to military certification. But first, let's look at what's been happening this week in defence. And we start in Brussels, where the European Council has established a set of common features for export end-user certificates for small arms and related ammunition. Authorised exports of this equipment from the EU now require more stringent checks of end-user certificates. As published in the Official Journal of the European Union on 18th of January, the aim is to diminish the risk of arms diversion to illicit or unintended users, create a level playing field, and increase clarity for the defence industry and its clients regarding relevant requirements. Elsewhere, France's defence procurement agency, the DGA, has ordered the first batch of 364 Serval lightweight multi-role armoured vehicles from Nexter Systems and Texelis, with deliveries beginning in 2022. The French MOD did not confirm the value of the procurement, but Shephard's Defence Insight estimates the unit cost of Serval at between €500,000 and €700,000. Some of these 4x4 vehicles are being procured under the 2019-2025 military programming law as part of the wider Scorpion modernisation programme for the French Army. In the Netherlands, plans are progressing to replace the Goalkeeper naval point defence system from 2025. The MOD has picked a combination of the rolling airframe missile and DART guided projectile as the optimal solution, with contracts to be awarded in 2022. The new system will be installed on both Royal Netherlands Navy Rotterdam-class landing platform dock vessels, as well as the Joint Logistics Support Ship Carol Dorman and the 2 anti-submarine warfare frigates planned to enter service from 2030. Moving to Eastern Europe, the Bulgarian Special Forces expect to receive their first batch of new armoured tactical vehicles by mid-2021, after the MOD placed an order via local manufacturer SAMAL 90 in late 2020. SAMARM, a joint venture between SAMAL 90 and UAE-based International Armoured Group, is expected to provide 98 multi-purpose combat vehicles in 10 variants. The exact type of vehicles to be provided remains undisclosed, although SAMARM is known to offer the Guardian 4x4 APC, Guardian Max light tactical vehicle, and the Reela MRAP, all of which are manufactured by IAG. And in naval news, despite ongoing efforts to renew its fleet, the US Coast Guard finds itself short of funds amid calls for an increase in spending. At the Virtual Surface Navy Symposium last week, the head of the US Coast Guard called for a $1 billion booster shot to its budget to address pressing needs amid pressures on an ageing fleet and a growing risk of capability gaps. As reported last year, nearly one-third of the US Coast Guard Atlantic Area Cutter Force has been in service for more than 50 years. 3 main procurement efforts are currently being followed in order to provide the US Coast Guard with newer, more capable platforms. These include the National Security Cutter, the Delayed Offshore Patrol Cutter, and the Fast Response Cutter. Time now, as always, to bring in the rest of the news team. So a big, warm podcast welcome to news editor Ben Vogel, air editor Tim Martin, and land reporter Flavia Camargo-Spera. Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Rich.
Hello.
So, Richard, looking at the story that you've mentioned in the end of the Newsround flyby about the US Coast Guard, and this call for a budget boost. So there's a kind of a principle at play here of if you don't ask, you don't get. But how realistic, in your view, is this call from the Admiral Schultz?
It was an interesting one. The presentation that Admiral Carl Schultz, who's the Commandant of the Coast Guard, gave during the show was very different in tone to previous years, where he's been much more open in voicing his concerns about funding. Nevertheless, of course, towards the end of the presentation, he did make that call for the $1 billion booster shot for the service and an uptick in budget of between 3 and 5%. So the FY 2021 request was a little over $12 billion. Can it get the increase? I don't think so. There's another interesting factor, or troubling factor for the Coast Guard, I should say, is that the service is struggling to get the recruits it needs. It falls about 30% short of its target of around 4,000 for each of the past 3 years or so. Schultz, he did say that recruitment is competitive, which what that effectively means is that other US military services are able to offer better deals to those thinking about such a career. They can offer larger signing on fees. They can offer university degrees. And the Coast Guard's recruitment bonus, which is, I think, a few $1,000s, maybe $4,000 or $5,000, just pales in a comparison. So between a choice between serving with a Coast Guard starved of funding, serving on 50, 60-year-old platforms, or going into service with the US Navy, Space Force, whatever you like, it's not really much of a decision to make, is it?
Richard, the story that you wrote mentioned 3 major US Coast Guard programs, but what about icebreaker procurement? Isn't that something that should be prioritised, given the ice caps are melting, shipping lanes opening up in the Arctic and so forth?
Well, if the ice caps are melting, you don't need icebreakers, do you? Just need regular vessels. I'm being facile here. Sorry. No, but basically, that you're right. The polar capability is very important to the Coast Guard. It has identified that procurement plan and that of the OPC as its 2 main ones that it has to get finished. I guess if I can just talk about the offshore patrol cutter, it's an interesting program, and this is where one of the 2 big problems for the Coast Guard sits. The offshore patrol cutter, the aim is for 25 vessels, but the timeline doesn't look great. Of course, it's already operating 50, 60-year-old vessels that need replacing yesterday, frankly. So the timeline for the offshore patrol cutter, the award of detailed design to Eastern Shipbuilding was 2016. Long lead material award 2017. Aimed to deliver the first ship in 2021. All those plans were scrapped when Hurricane Michael did its damage to the shipyard's Florida sites. So delivery of the first in class will not be till 2022 at the earliest. And this is just for the first 4 vessels. Eastern had the contract for the build of the first vessel plus 8 on option, but this was modified by the Department of Homeland Security for the delivery of just the first 4 in class. So that whole program is now being recompeted for the remaining up to 21 vessels, which will be capable. They're 110 meters long. There'll be 4,500 tons in displacement. But as I said, the Coast Guard needs them yesterday, and the current build timeline and the recompete isn't able to work to that time frame. On the polar security cutter, Schultz said that he sees a need for about 6 in total, 3 large, 3 medium size, but funding, of course, is an issue. So he thinks that leasing is potentially the best option for the time being to fill that short-term gap. But as we know, a short-term gap can become a medium to long-term gap if you take your eye off the ball.
And what about a broader global dimension? There was some research that the RAND Corporation did a couple of years ago, said that China had boosted its Coast Guard tonnage by more than 70% over the first half of the last decade with power to add. Even with extra funding, if by some miracle it materializes, how can the US keep pace? Is there a need for the US to keep pace?
It doesn't need to keep pace, frankly. What the US Coast Guard is doing really well in the Asia-Pacific region is improving capacity and capability of the region's Coast Guards. The countries in that region see their Coast Guards, I think, as a really good counter solution to the use by China of its Coast Guard as kind of a non-grey-hulled aggressive force. So if you counter a Coast Guard with a naval vessel, China, probably rightly or wrongly, can suggest that they are the victim of escalation by a rival. If you counter a Coast Guard vessel with a Coast Guard vessel, they can't do that. So what the US Coast Guard is doing really well is improving capability of regional countries, such as the Philippines. The Philippines Coast Guard, in terms of tonnage, far outstrips its Navy. I think it's increased its capacity by about 100% in the past 10 years or so. So no, I don't think the Coast Guard needs to keep pace with China. I think it's perfectly capable of providing the training and skills needed for regional nations to do that job. The US can't be everywhere at once. Okay, thanks very much. Tim, on to air now. And I want to be controversial, but I'm not sure if I should be. I will be. So the UK is buying Chinese planes for its E-7 fleet. Surely that's got to be a security risk.
Yes, so there's grey areas with this one, not exactly straightforward, but as you've kind of teed up, yes, it is true that the aircraft that the UK are buying as part of the E-7 acquisition were once upon a time based in China and Hong Kong. So the first 2 airframes, which are Boeing 737, repurposed Boeing 737 next generation aircraft did belong to Chinese commercial operators at one point, and those two will eventually become part of a larger fleet for the UK as part of as I say, the E-7 fleet of early warning platforms, which is estimated to be between 3 and 5 units. Once plans have been confirmed, I think we'll get a clear picture from the integrated review. The deal initially was for 5, but there's some suggestions that it could be reduced to just 3. So 2 of the 5 or of the 3, as I say, have been operated by Chinese operators, and that's been a sore point for the UK MOD, or at least they've had to come out and defend the acquisition.
What was the MOD's, I guess, reaction to this? You've said they've come out and defended the acquisition. Is there a threat or a potential security threat here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the threat itself is along the lines of there's potential that the repurposed aircraft have some spyware in there, or there'll be some software, or at least it's feasible that that's the way in which the Chinese state could compromise UK national security. The MOD have said that there will be comprehensive security checks prior to new mission systems installed. And of course, because they're repurposed aircraft, you're talking about a conversion from the commercial airlines, from the next generation to becoming the E-7s. So, that's a fairly extensive and comprehensive process, and it also involves the installation of Northrop Grumman's MESA radar. So it does seem to me, at least, fairly unlikely that that China have intentionally gone ahead with integrating some form of spying devices into the aircraft themselves, and also the process in terms of how the UK got them was from a sourcing process, and as we kind of often hear from the MOD, that the risk-based approach that they take to procurement is very thorough. So in effect, you would really have to be doubting those processes by which the UK decided to source these via a broker. So it's I suppose it's my opinion that I'm a little bit circumspect as to the real publicity of this one, and whether it's genuine, that there is a real threat. I don't believe so, and that's based off speaking to a source from the UK MOD and what they had to say for themselves. So
it's par for the course, isn't it? With the UK, it wants X number, which is cut to X number, which ends up being a fraction of what the UK really needs. How's the acquisition, I guess, looking ahead of the integrated review, and where does it fit in terms of RAF modernisation and equipment plans? Because there could be some capability gaps.
Yeah, that's true. So just in terms of kind of latest developments, in November 2020, going back a couple of months, I suppose, the fuselage sections for the E-7 were delivered to STS Aviation Services. So from their Birmingham facility, they're working on conversion. The first aircraft won't be delivered to the UK. Eventually it'll go to RAF Lossiemouth in Moray. So that'll happen in and around 2023. So I mean that's fairly steady progress. There's nothing really too off on those developments. So fairly promising. But as you say, E-7 is part of kind of a wider modernisation plans, which includes additional F-35 fighters, additional Poseidons, and Protector RG Mark 1 UAVs, and the Protectors are also due to begin delivery from 2023 onward. So I suppose that's the bigger picture of where all this fits.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. Let's move on to the land side now. Flavia, a fairly techie story from you regarding the UK testing a fully autonomous AI-controlled driven capabilities. What are we talking about?
Actually, the UK is progressing with its effort to develop robotic capabilities. And in this case, it was the Merlin robot. The British MOD has been working with Roriba Miro to develop this capability. It's a fully autonomous capability to detect and report chemical agents over large areas. And it was successfully tested. The MOD Defense Science and Technology Laboratory released pictures and video footage of the trial. This test involved the Merlin prototype and specialist counter CBRN operators from the Royal Air Force. And during this test, the robot carried out simulated chemical reconnaissance tasks. Actually, it covered a 10,000 square meters area. And the test checked out different autonomous behaviors for searching and mapping operations, obstacle avoidance, and chemical mapping. When Merlin used it during this test an off-the-shelf chemical vapor sensor that was positioned close to the ground, and this sensor allowed the robot to find clean routes through contaminated areas.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners, it's sort of along the same sort of size as, say, a PackBot 510, I think. Tell us about this UGV. What are its characteristics?
The MOD described Merlin as a low-cost experiment platform. It enables to explore and validate technologies and user concepts relatively cheaply. And Merlin can be used continuously for several hours, allowing operators to monitor and manage scenes from standoff distance. So it's a way to protect ground troops, to keep them safe, to not expose them to dangerous situations and to dangerous scenes. And Merlin has the autonomy to sense chemical agents. It can also avoid physical objects, and it can operate with artificial intelligence, navigation mapping.
Tell me about Merlin then, Flavia. How did it come about?
Merlin was initially developed as part of Project Minerva. But this test, it was conducted under Project Servitus. The MOD is currently running the Servitus, and this project was funded by the MOD Strategic Command and the Office for Security Counterterrorism in the Home Office. The Servitus focuses on chemical survey of terrain using autonomous capabilities, autonomous robots. And the aim of the Servitus is to remove the need to deploy military and civilian personnel in dangerous areas and reduce overall human workload. Under Servitus, Roriba Miro was awarded a contract to further develop the Merlin robot, produced for Minerva project, and under Servitus, it's specifically targeted the needs of the Servitus program.
Okay, thanks, Flavia. Very interesting. Thanks all. That was a good chat. For our listeners, if you'd like to find out more about Shephard's daily defence news coverage, visit its website, shepherdmedia.com/news, or download the app by visiting shepherdmedia.com/app, available on App Store and Google Play Store. Coming up next, news editor Ben Vogel speaks with Neil Fraser, Director of Defence and Space Programmes at NSSL Global, about the US Armed Forces and how it should respond to grey zone warfare threats.
Their goal is to win without going to war, to achieve their objectives by breaking our willpower, using attacks below the threshold that would prompt a warfighting response. These attacks on our way of life from authoritarian rivals and extremist ideologies are remarkably difficult to defeat without undermining the very freedoms we want to protect. We are exposed through our openness.
This is General Sir Nick Carter, head of the UK Armed Forces. Speaking at the Policy Exchange think tank, General Carter sounded a grave warning. The UK and its allies are operating in a rapidly changing world. And while a focus on counterinsurgency operations may have dominated the early years of the century, attention has now shifted to the threat posed by China and Russia.
Their way of warfare is strategic. It is synchronized and it is systematic, and our response must be too.
This is Shephard Studios' podcast series on Five Eyes connectivity, sponsored by our partner, Viasat. In this second series, we're exploring the military connectivity issues facing the Five Eyes nations and looking at the work underway to ensure communication networks can withstand the expected threats of tomorrow. In this episode, we focus on the UK and hear how a rapidly shifting threat environment is driving a transformation of British military capabilities. As General Carter puts it, the British military is moving from an industrial age of platforms to an information age of systems. The Five Eyes Connectivity podcast was created by Shephard Studio in partnership with our sponsor, Viasat. To learn more about Viasat's support to the Five Eyes nations, visit fiveeyesconnect.com for capability profiles, white papers, videos, and more. Until next time.
As the 21st century progresses, Western militaries must operate in an ever-changing and increasingly volatile environment. Rapidly evolving AI and automation technology, hybrid approaches, and the grey zone are making modern threats harder to identify and mitigate, with adversaries looking to disrupt and disable civilian and military targets to achieve objectives without engaging in open hostilities or clearly crossing the threshold into armed conflict. In this context, robust and secure communications are essential, and this is as true for the UK Armed Forces as any of its allies. To discuss this and other issues, I'm joined by Neil Fraser, Director of Defence and Space Programmes at NSSL Global since 2020, and a former colonel in the British Army. Neil completed 3 tours in Afghanistan and was responsible for UK MOD global satellite and strategic radio communications projects. Neil, welcome to the Weekly Defence Podcast.
Ben, thanks so much, and looking forward to your questions.
Okay, well, on that note, I'll begin. In the introduction, Neil, I touched on the need for robust and secure info pathways for the UK Armed Forces, but perhaps you'd care to elaborate on this particular issue, given your experience.
Yeah, sure, Ben. Thanks so much. I mean, I think there's always been a need for clearly robust and secure communications for military personnel and indeed wider government. And I think the thing that has changed notably, and I think the Defence Review touched on this, and indeed the previous Security and Defence Review, is the change in nature of the threat and how that threat has expanded into something really called the grey zone, or referred to as the grey zone. And clearly the government's now looking at ways to respond to that threat, and I think that's the context in which the military operates. I mean, clearly political and military leaders have stated that whilst we were engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan for a decade or more, our adversaries have been watching us. They've been taking views on our vulnerabilities, they've been re-equipping, they've been adjusting their approach, and their activities in cyberspace and indeed in the influence space, so social media, etc., are there to undermine us. And so, in addition to the constant requirement for robust and resilient communications, the military is now facing this unpredictable, rapidly changing world where technology has proliferated around the military. There's all these hybrid approaches and this grey zone, which makes modern threats really hard to identify and mitigate. And as you've referred to, our adversaries or potential aggressors are looking to disrupt targets, both civilian and military. So the environment's very complicated, but the need for robust and resilient communications is still fundamentally there. And maybe later on I'll talk about how that might be delivered.
Well, perhaps the next question might sort of cue in that answer. I mean, we're coming up to the publication of the integrated review, Neil, possibly in February or maybe in March. The date keeps moving. Given what you've just said about the variegated and diverse nature of the grey zone threats that the West faces in the UK as well. How much of a role do you think the response to these threats will play in the integrated review?
So February, March, who knows? I think there's lots of impacts of what's happening politically and globally. But I think as you look at the integrated review and related documentation such as multi-domain integrated force, we see much activity in the UK to address these rapidly changing threats. And that ranges from, if you like, strategically, a thing called fusion doctrine, which seeks to formalise a cross-government approach to understand and deal with these, in some cases, almost intangible threats. And we saw some of that with the response to Salisbury poison in 2018. And this coming together of military and emergency services and public health to deal with the incident. And we've always traditionally done that cross-government. But it was more linking the political response to that was an indicator of how the government and internationally, NATO and our European allies will respond to acts of aggression that fall short of armed conflict. And robust communications and the ability to share information are clearly critical across government and with allies, both 24/7, 365, in whatever military state we're in. And whilst clearly we await the review, it's clear defence is looking to a new way of operating. And there's a concept now called the multi-domain integrated force, which is more than just an evolution of joint. It'd be cynical to think it is that. It recognises very clearly the new domains of space and cyber, how these cross-cut, and recognise the increasing role of information and influence, which is driving a lot of the development across all the warfighting domains and including the land domain. I think defence is going to rebalance. It's going to need to rebalance. It needs to do that within resources. And this is a real challenge. No threat has been replaced. It's just been added to. They've expanded. And so closer working across government, for example, the FCDO, so the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, on outreach and engagement, which is a big task, particularly for the Army, or with GCHQ on intelligence, can deliver greater effect cross-government and therefore potentially more efficient use of military resource. So I think there's a lot to play in the defence review and in the context of the reality, the fiscal reality post-COVID and Brexit, etc. So complicated stuff if you're a military planner.
It must be very complicated to implement, because it seems to be a quite an interesting fusion of traditional military power, or hard power, as you might call it, and soft power. Is that something that, in your experience when you were working on the Skynet program, were you looking at things in that sense even then, or is this a much kind of newer development?
I think if I interpret that as, is there a combination between military power and sort of soft or commercial influence, then yeah, some of my experience pre-Skynet was working on civil military operations. So I did a tour with the Americans in, 2004 and 5. So before the Brits went into Helmand. And there was a lot of this linking of kinetic effect with influence effect. And I think that's a really important thing. So if you look at the Army, as it starts to look at a broader defence engagement activity, so lots of small teams across many African states, for example, or indeed the operation in Mali, which is a bit more robust, but indeed is very small dispersed teams. What we're seeing is this more persistent engagement activity that either prevents or generates indigenous capability to deal with, or will ultimately deal with threats. And I think that's got interesting communications lessons from that. And then on the second thing, there's also a blurring of capability between hard military capabilities, so your green boxes and your kind of assured sovereign type systems, and greater use of commercial technology all over defence and all over government. And I think that's a good thing. I think it brings the best of both worlds, and more importantly, brings additional choice and resilience and lots of options to defence planners and deliverers.
You mentioned, Neil, that there are some interesting communications lessons to be learned from previous experience. But given the nature of the various threats that we've already been speaking about, and despite the fact that there are a number of new technologies under development, how do militaries avoid being drawn into a game of almost of whack-a-mole, where you're just constantly responding to the latest danger and the latest problem in order to make your communication secure?
Yeah, and that's a tricky question, Ben, and there's so many angles and rabbit holes. I think defence has got a heritage, like I referred to, in developing and delivering bespoke secure solutions. The challenge is those then take a long time to field. A big radio programme or satellite fits to ships, can take 5-10 years to roll out. and it's used for decades, and therefore it becomes more vulnerable over time to threats. And we've talked about how those develop. And it also struggles to keep up with growing information demands. So that core equipment, if you like, the green boxes, for want of a better word, really struggles to keep up with demand and becomes vulnerable. And our adversaries often exploit the latest commercial technology. So in the realm of hacking and jamming, they challenge us. They know how we operate. Now, I'm no longer in uniform. So I don't have access to details, but there's enough in the public domain to know that in Syria and Eastern Europe, the West's military and our allies' networks have been really challenged. So there's a couple of general principles which have been very close to my experience, that if you get it right, you have a better chance of fighting through any challenge. And that's to create a thing called a PACE plan. So primary, alternate, contingent, and emergency. And so you have lots of options, and that can be lots of different technology. And most NATO nations use a mix of military satellite communications, so MILSAT, and that's often X-band and UHF, from either their national system or other alliance members, and COMSAT, so commercial satellite services, predominantly in bands L, KU, and KA. And I won't go into much more detail. And that can be leased or through partnerships. And this kind of combination of access to different bands of capability and different satellites brings choice. It allows defence to exploit innovation in the commercial sector, and it brings resilience when you're threatened with hostile action. So you can default to different systems. And certainly from my operational experience, which includes a couple of early entry tours, so when you're pretty much first in, satellite communications has been absolutely critical in providing independent and assured communications from the moment you land, and to enable a multinational force where deploying a sort of terrestrial system, so towers or rebroadcast stations, will take time. And even if it's there, it will be denied. So I don't think satellite's the solution to everything, but it does provide that independence early on. That's really critical. Now many listeners will know space is also very interesting at the moment, and it's an increasingly challenged domain. Anti-satellite weapons are not new. Satellite systems can be denied on the ground. But there is this sort of discussion about whether a military satellite is kind of more of a legitimate target than a commercial satellite, which might service many nations and different types of users. I think in any case, a kinetic attack on a satellite with an anti-satellite weapon is a serious upping of the game and would have consequences for the globe. So there's lots of tunes to play at lots of levels in delivering that system that avoids you having to counter every single threat with some individual solution that you roll out really quickly.
Okay, so there's clearly a move to develop a broad set of capabilities that are agile, resilient, and redundant. But another issue that the military in the UK and indeed elsewhere in the Western world faces is the need to make sure that there is interoperability and seamless interoperability, more to the point, between the various communication systems that are available. So how is that being achieved? Is it being achieved better now than before? What else needs to be done in order to achieve this particular objective?
Yeah, so interoperability is a very complicated question, and it's wrapped up in everything from standards to cultures to technology. I think the key thing to know is industry's got a big part in this game. And so industry, which tends to look at not necessarily specific company I'm with or have been with, but industry in the round, tends to be looking at the bigger global markets, so millions of consumers. And so the development of technology, which was hitherto, maybe 15, 20 years ago, really the prime role of governments and militaries, has shifted to the commercial sector. And so in the commercial sector, delivering interoperability is fundamental. Delivering a network that allows my banking app to work on my iPhone or my iPad or my computer and present to me the same information, but in a slightly different way based on the device and the quality of the network I'm using, is it's a no-brainer. It's just done. And I can, send information across to another bank and get it done. So I think everyone recognises that need for interoperability. And operationally, the last decade or so fundamentally has been the UK operating with allies, and to a far closer degree than perhaps we ever envisaged in a thing called the Cold War, where we might have a division of Brits and then one side would have Germans, the other side Americans. That was interoperability, was a liaison officer on your flank. Now it's down to small groups of people operating together. And so therefore, the backbone, the network backbone has to be put in place to allow that. And then at the information layer, there has to be interoperability. And so one of the big lessons from Afghanistan, which is being taken forward, I would presume, by UK military, is federated systems. So the federation of the information layer in Afghanistan, led by NATO. So everyone could access that kind of core information and operate together. But at some level, then there were their own tactical national systems. And so it's a thing that has to be done at the information layer, the kind of application layer, and the network layer to varying degrees. And like I say, I think industry's got a really big role in it. And a lot of the innovation and experimentation being done in UK, whether it's with the Royal Marines looking at their future commando force, or whether it's the Army looking at Army 2020 and the Army Warfighting Experiment. And we've supported both those organisations from NSSL Global with equipment and ideas and testing integration realities, is to try and look at how they integrate both with allies and bring in new technology from industry to work with legacy equipment. Because, you know, if we're spending billions of pounds on taxpayers' money, you can't just throw the kit away because there's a new shiny idea. I mean, that's just not realistic. And so doing that focused innovation and tangible delivery is really important.
One last question, Neil. Looking at developments in the United States, particularly in terms of the Joint All-Domain Command and Control System, this is kind of single universal battle space management system for the DoD. Do you think the UK can achieve anything similar in the near to medium term?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our relationship with the US and the wider Five Eyes nations, but particularly the US in terms of development of command and control systems, is really close. Always has been, and I think is a really important reality. And lots of industrial and political and military effort there. I think we tend to focus on the network. I think that's the first thing you've got to get right. I mean, you've got to create a network to host a single management system. I've talked about the banking app analogy. It's kind of trying to create that environment for defence. So once you've got that digital backbone from headquarters to the soldier, you're then trying to get on top of that in some kind of information advantage and share that information around military users. And the British Army uses a term now called information manoeuvre. And it's more than a buzzword. It involves the use of information in all its forms to understand the environment you're operating in better than anyone else, and certainly better than the enemy, and make the most of that advantage. And that requires a scale and a speed of information. This goes back to the AI question that's changed almost beyond recognition. If you think the Internet of Things, ML/AI we've mentioned, that information is now embedded into every layer of the organization and increasingly every bit of the infrastructure. So you've got vehicles that have health monitoring systems on. You might have individuals with body-worn monitoring devices. And all these things are either in service or being discussed. So that requires a cultural shift and a technology shift. And then when you've got that digital backbone, you've then got to gear that to the application and the information layer. And defence talks about having a single information environment, which is kind of the same sort of view, is looking at what's feasible, what's essential, and how do you get that balance between push and pull of information and the software to avoid overloading people. The British Army has the Bowman system now. It's on its final evolution of its battle management system. There's various joint applications and joint systems, and there's lots of work ongoing trying to connect those. But we shouldn't think that the needs of a rifleman in the left-hand trench are the same as a chief of operations somewhere else. They have different information demands. So whilst you might have this digital backbone that connects them, and whilst you might have this single information environment or battle management system that connects them, how you deliver the right information to the right person at the right time is fundamentally difficult. And I think that's where a lot of thinking has to be done. And so as we drive from a joint force into a multi-domain integrated force, it's that flow of information from connected sensors to shooters with a human in the loop that's really critical.
Neil Fraser, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben.
It's not that we can't hit the targets we want to hit, it's that we can't hit enough of them with the missiles and the launch platforms that we can get close enough, or that we can afford.
Another worry I have is it's the kind of Kodak moment with missiles. Is at what point does the paradigm shift kick in? At what point have you reached the end of the road with missiles? And at what point do you need to start investing in other technologies?
The global threat landscape is changing, but the UK isn't standing still. In November, the government pledged an extra £16.5 billion for military investment over the next 4 years. This money is aimed at modernising the armed forces, helping them to adapt to a new strategic reality. A range of new or rapidly developing complex weapon technologies have come into focus in recent years for the UK and its NATO allies. But what exactly is driving these shifting equipment priorities?
To develop a credible either ballistic missile or hypersonic missile defence system there would cost in the billions of pounds, which we just don't have in the UK, that it's got to be as a collaborative effort.
Welcome to the Defining the Future podcast, Shephard Studios' series on aerospace and defence innovation, sponsored by our partner Raytheon UK. Over the course of 4 episodes, we will tell the story of how innovation, fostered by industry, is helping the UK step out of the shadow of Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic. We will hear how emerging technologies are supporting the prosperity agenda developed by the government to accelerate Britain's growth in these uncertain times. And we will hear from representatives across industry about how transformation and cutting-edge technologies designed for the military are beginning to reshape the commercial sector. To learn more about efforts underway to deliver the complex weapons of the future, listen to the Defining the Future podcast, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Shephard's R editor, Tim Martin, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Fabrizio Boggiani, SVP of Airborne Systems at Leonardo, as we discuss the company's Falco Xplorer MALE UAV program. Fabrizio, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So let's start, Fabrizio, and rewind a little bit back to Paris Air Show of 2019, because that's when Falco Xplorer was first unveiled to the public. Can you give us an idea of why Leonardo decided from a business perspective to introduce the aircraft to the market, and what's happened since then?
You see, our decision was, of course, based on also on the long experience that we have had on the UAVs, starting many years ago. And then we realized that the market was asking, and we had the capabilities to respond to the market, which was asking for more, let's say, performances, longer endurance, and a significant increase in the payload availability on board, typically for mission of for surveillance mission, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission. This not only in the military domain, but as well in the civilian one. I cannot say already in the commercial, at least not as far as Leonardo is concerned. So we, based on these factors, on one side our capabilities, on the other the market demand, we decided to start some years ago the design and development of a new member of the Falco family, which is the Falco Xplorer. We launched it at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget back in June 2019. And from that moment onwards, we have, on one side, discussed and agreed with our national authority in Italy, military national authority, in view of the certification of the Falco Xplorer, because our goal is to have it certified and so even more suitable and allowed to fly over areas which are normally forbidden, let's say, for this type of UAV of such a size. This on one side, this has been a discussion, and we have also agreed a plan for this certification, which mainly is based on flight tests. We have then set ourselves up in a military base, in an Italian Air Force military base in the south of Italy. We have set it up, and then we have started, let's say, our flight campaign as agreed with the Italian Military Certification Authority. Then I have to say that somehow, unfortunately, in 2020, everybody of us has been affected by the virus effect, and so our program has slowed down somehow during 2020. But now we are ready to restart full force, or to the maximum possible force allowed by the current conditions.
Okay, and given the delays and complications with the flight tests, do you have any ideas as to when you will have certification, or when you will conclude the flight testing at this stage, or is it just in progress for the meantime?
No, I think that we will reach significant milestones if our plan, let's say, is going to be confirmed. We will reach significant milestones within the year end. And then in the course of 2022, next year, we will reach, let's say, the full certification as we were expecting.
And is that then dependent on how things change in terms of the test setup at the airbase that you mentioned? And there'll be more openness or more availability for flight tests to go ahead? Is that what the plan is based on? Things opening up and less restrictions?
Yes. I mean, but the main point was exactly about restrictions, because literally we were not allowed somehow to travel. You understand that for supporting a flight campaign of this size, I have to say, it's not only to have some few people on the ground, but you have to have a good number of people deployed on the ground in the test range, and then also to have the support and the possibility to be supported from both, let's say, the internal resources and even the supply chain. All of this was somehow affected. And now, even, I repeat, the restrictions are there, but we have defined exactly the various steps to be done. And so we think that we can go back almost to normal with respect to our original plan.
Okay, and is there a program of record in place for Italy? Has a production contract been agreed with a set number of systems to be bought, or where do things stand on that front?
You see, we are in discussion, surely, as well. Italy, once again, due to this situation that is around us, had to review somehow some priorities. But nevertheless, we are in discussion, and we are hopeful that we can progress this discussion up to the point where also we can have a significant, let's say, launch, let's say, of our product on the market. Surely the Italian MOD, as I said even before when talking about the certification, is very much in support of this new mail from Italy.
Okay. And we ran a story last week, Fabrizio, that mentioned that Egypt are understood to be highly interested in the Falco Xplorer. And there's discussions behind the scenes between Leonardo and the Egyptian MOD, as we understand it, to discuss the possibility of indigenous UAV capabilities and production. What more can the company tell us about those things?
You see, surely there are, with some countries around the world, government-to-government discussions. In this moment, I don't have that much to add specifically to any one of this country. As I told you, we are pleased and happy of the support that our government gives us, and so this could be as well with some countries.
Okay, and if we turn the conversation slightly then to, I'm sure you will have heard quite a lot of things like loyal wingmen and low-cost UAVs. There's quite a big buzz within industry at the moment on those types of concepts. Where would the company stand on what those types of things mean for the future of the male UAV market? And can these things coexist happily?
You see, I have to say that surely one of the design drivers that we have had and still we have in the development phase now is the possibility of having, let's say, to have the UAV and the Falco Xplorer specifically as part of a network somehow, so able to operate together with our other type of platforms, being part of a joint fleet so that the UAV and the Falco Xplorer specifically can perform some tasks in addition to the ones performed by the manned aircraft. This is typical or could be typical in the military domain, but what we see is, as well as I was saying before at the start, let's say also the paramilitary and civilian activities that are even, and police activities, I have to say, that are nowadays and in the last few years even become highly important. I cannot say more important than the military ones, but highly important for also the homeland security, for example. So all of this, this type of network, this type of systems can see, let's say, the Falco Xplorer and the UAV like the Falco Xplorer is to be part of these tasks. Honestly, we are not in the so focused to the, let's say, low-cost target for our UAV, but more on the high performance and the versatility of our UAV, the possibility to perform even multi-missions. So I could say that we are talking about low-cost mission, let's say, in the sense of having a cost per flying hours that is able then to give, let's say, benefit to many different end users and operators at the same time with the same flight. So this is a way to reduce the cost, let's say, of the flight hours because the data are used by more than one operator. And this is the scope of the Falco Xplorer, being a multi-sensor and multi-mission aircraft able to stay on board, to stay airborne for almost 24 hours and able to serve different tasks and different missions.
And I suppose when you mentioned high performance, I suppose the company might also suggest that when you look at male UAVs, comparing them to something like the low-cost UAVs, one of the distinctive differences between the two might also be tracking targets at range, because presumably something like the Falco Xplorer would be able to have a standoff range of, say, hundreds of kilometers, whereas the low-cost UAVs wouldn't have that. Would that be a fair characterization?
In reality, what we see is the combination of range, distance, surely, endurance, so capability of persistence, and we aim even more, or at least as far as some of the customers we have been able to speak with are concerned, to even focus more on the high definition, high resolution, so very high quality of the data, for example, in the field of the electro-optics, that we are able to provide to the operator and to the end user. So this is, we believe, mainly even more than the range per se. We remain in yes, we are in the male segment in this moment with the Falco Xplorer, but we are in the lower range of male. We are not talking about a UAV with a very high maximum takeoff weight. We are talking about a 1.3 tons maximum takeoff weight. So to a certain extent is in the entry level, but already with very significant high performances, in particular, I repeat, in terms of quality of the data that we can provide to the user.
Okay, and one other big issue, I guess, for those thinking of buying the aircraft or investing in it will be cyber defenses. Can you talk just about how important that will be for customers? And we're seeing instances of GPS denials and things like that. What can you say on that front?
We have to understand, and we have understood that, of course, if now, as I was mentioning before, the UAV and specifically our Falco Xplorer will be part, generally speaking, of a network to collect information, and particularly might be even to collect information in areas that are more dangerous to a certain extent with respect to the ones where, for example, a manned aircraft can fly over. We have to consider that, of course, it must be able to resist to this type of attack, to this type of threats. And obviously, this is one part that we know we have the provision for. Obviously, then we will develop together with the end user, whichever the end user is going to be or are going to be. Hopefully, of course, we will based on the scenario where they intend to operate.
Okay, and maybe if we also just look at regional conflicts at the moment and the advantages of male UAVs, because there has been suggestions, for example, particularly in the Nagorno-Karabakh, that operators have taken advantage of gaps in short-range air defenses. Would that really be kind of an acid test for the Falco Xplorer, being able to do that type of thing?
Our idea of the Falco Xplorer was to design an UAV able to face different CONOPs, different requirements. So this, of course, is one of them. Is not the only one, obviously, but is one of them. This clearly then, as we are not operating in any type of such environment, but it could be then the end users. Of course, we must be ready to customize our system in order to face the type of missions and the type of tasks that the end user wants to perform. Surely, what we have been very careful in doing has been to provide the Falco Xplorer with all the provisions and to have the versatility of being adapted to different. And so what you mentioned could be, but this is then a call from the end user, could be one of the application of the Falco Xplorer, yes.
Okay, and just on kind of financials and looking at how the defense market has changed, let's say in the last 12 months with COVID, are you seeing anything significant in terms of how military operators are moving out with unmanned acquisitions? Are they holding back? Are they still prepared to make the level of investment that you might have expected in, say, 2019 when you were first unveiled the Falco Xplorer?
What we have experienced, and of course not only in the UAV, but generally speaking, I have to say in the market, is a postponement of some procurement and a slowing down of this process. We haven't had the impression, let's say, up to now, even if unfortunately, as everybody of us is experiencing, situation is still quite not stable, I have to say, not well defined, but we haven't had the impression that there is a change in the direction with respect to the acquisition of this type of assets. It might be even on the other hand that this providing, of course, we are able to make this type of assets convenient from the point of view of the in-service costs, that there could be even more. But in this moment, we haven't really seen any significant change in direction that could affect our expectations. Surely, there have been a postponement. Surely, the market is in delay with respect to what we could have hoped before.
Okay. Well, Fabrizio, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have been listening to another episode of the Weekly Defence Podcast. A big thanks to everyone who took the time in being with us today, and for our listeners, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. Shephard Media is also offering a 20% discount for annual subscription to premium news. Head over to shepherdmedia.com/subscribe and insert code podcast20 to redeem. Valid until the 31st of March 2021. Until next week, thanks for listening.